Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Trading the Close. I am your host for today, Lawton Ho, and I'm joined by
Drew Dosick. Hey, everybody.
today another crazy day in the markets, wasn't it, Drew?
Yeah, it was almost opposite of yesterday, except what's missing today is volume. So everything's floating up, and it can be anticipated. We got the FOMC tomorrow. I guarantee a lot of investors aren't really wanting to go ahead with a big investment decision today. They're going to wait on see what JP has to say, Jerome Powell, that is, tomorrow.
Cool. All right, Drew, let's hop into it. You have your charts to share for me?
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. Let's take a look at the heat map to start off. We
Can you
see
present
here
your charts for me, Drew? Share your charts for me.
Absolutely. Here, my bad about that, my friend.
I feel like that would be helpful to the guests out there.
Yeah, you're going to need to see these. Check this out, guys. So we've got NVIDIA up 8.36% today after that massive fall yesterday. But what else do we have? We have other players too. We have some of the other big stocks like Meta, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, Apple, Broadcom, all of them doing well today. So one sector, though, that's not doing so well are consumer durables as well as finance. You see there's a lot of red on this screen over here. However, the SPX, the SMH, IWM, all of them are moving up, including the Dow Jones. So the big stocks are really pulling their weight today. Again, light volume. So whenever there's light volume, there's not a lot of conviction. So keep that in mind when you're analyzing these charts. We'll need to see what other earnings come out this week to really determine which way the markets are going to move. And I've already switched over to the SPX. You see right here, and I'm zooming in. Here was yesterday's down day, and then today is a nice move up. We're right now at 6,067 on the SPX. I'd mentioned to you yesterday, I thought that if we do start to bounce from this big fall, next area to look out for is this portion of the parallel channel. We've got a gap fill there too. Gap fill is located at 6,101.25. So keep an eye on that for tomorrow, especially after the FOMC to see if we run right up into that gap fill, potentially even going up to the parallel.
Yeah, and quick question for you, Drew. So looking at the S&P here, so how much of this momentum is, just is a rebound? And how much of it is potentially like positive news or people realizing that it's actually not that bad?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Like when this news came out yesterday about DeepSeek, and it really came out over the weekend, but when it hit the markets was yesterday, and they were expressing, just to remind anybody that didn't know, that they had an opportunity to run AI with less advanced chips, costing a lot less money too. So when that was released, all of the semiconductors got hit here in the United States because we're investing, a lot of other companies are investing heavily in these advanced AI chips. Well, I think the realization started sitting in, like if the US is currently deciding to potentially ban TikTok, which is out of China, because of potential spying situations and conflicts of interest. Wouldn't we do the same thing with something like an AI with DeepSeek? So I don't know if it's going to affect the markets as much as we all thought yesterday. So that's why I think you're seeing the bounce up that you're seeing today, especially on NVIDIA.
Yeah, and it looks like it's heading towards the bottom of that parallel, like you were talking about, potentially a retrace.
That's correct. And you notice here, that was the previous all-time high. We made new all-time highs before the sell that occurred on Monday. So if we do even touch the bottom end of that parallel, we will be looking at making potential new all-time highs again.
Okay, got it. What's next, Drew? The SMH, the big loser of yesterday.
It was a tough trade for anybody in the SMH yesterday, no doubt about it. But as you see here, what a fantastic bounce back today. This is the daily chart. Notice the volume down here, though. This is something I like to pay attention to. Whenever you have a candle that just really sticks out, it's really making, an out of the ordinary average for this daily volume candles that we see down here at the bottom of the screen. Whenever that happens, pay close attention to it, because typically what happens is whenever price comes back up to the top of it, the power of that volume, everybody that was involved in either selling or buying at that point is going to want to unload and potentially push that price down there too. So keep your eye out on SMH. If you notice too, this upsloping parallel will coincide with the top end of that candle. So that's going to be something to watch tomorrow, no doubt.
Yep. All right. What do we got next?
Now, up next, I didn't touch on this yesterday, and I wanted to bring it up today because today, as I mentioned, the Dow Jones is up again today. But we're now getting closer to all-time highs. You see, I've got that listed on the chart. We got all-time highs on the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index at 45,073.63 cents. So tomorrow is an opportunity for us to touch that all-time high. But one thing I want to point out, notice this vertical move that's coming up into the all-time high. And if we go back over into the SMH, notice that vertical move into the 50% area of resistance. Notice this vertical move right into the parallel. It's very similar how Dow Jones is making that very vertical move up, which typically results in equal downward pressure once it does hit resistance. And tomorrow we could see that resistance with the all-time high just around the corner.
Yeah, and I mean, is this something you'd look to trade? Is it actionable at all, or just something to be aware of when you're, going into the FOMC meeting and more?
You could certainly trade this. There's only 30 stocks in the Dow Jones. So it's not one of the indices that I really pay attention to because I'd rather pay attention to the S&P 500, IWM that's got 2,000 stocks. Those indexes or indices are going to cover the broad sense of the market better. So Dow Jones is one that I don't necessarily pay attention to. However, when it is hitting resistance areas and key support areas, I do pay attention to it. And so what you can do is simply just Google the 30 stocks in Dow Jones, see which one of those stocks are also into resistance, and you can play the Dow Jones that way too.
Awesome. Great. What do we got next? IWM?
Yeah, up next, IWM. Just wanted to touch on this briefly to show you that, hey, we are still not breaking out of this area. The financials I touched on too on the heat map have not broken out. They were all red today. So should we start seeing green momentum in the financial sector, we likely are going to see a push up above this declining trend line. But so far, it's consolidating exactly the way technical trend lines are designed. We come up into it, and now we've been consolidating right here down this trend line. It's now almost mature, so it's about time for it to break out above this or fall back down and retest that support area.
Cool. Nice. And I see you already have Bitcoin pulled up. We were talking yesterday a little bit about how Bitcoin was remaining strong despite all the selling pressure in the market. So, I mean, with the markets having upticking today, how did Bitcoin perform?
Yeah, Bitcoin didn't really follow the markets up quite as much. However, there was really nothing lost for Bitcoin. Even though it is down just slightly, you see 0.67%, it's still chopping around in this parallel. And as I mentioned yesterday, as long as we maintain in the top 50% of this parallel, odds are that we will go up and tag the top end of that parallel. So watch this area if it gets broken. And we saw price action yesterday attempted to do so and got saved. That tells me here there's a lot of buyers sitting and watching that price area to make sure that Bitcoin still has momentum to move up and move forward.
Got it.
All right. Next, I wanted to touch on, we've got a lot of earnings this week.
That's
one
true.
of which today we've got Starbucks, SAP, and FFIV. So on Starbucks, I did want to give you guys a heads up. We do have this declining trend line that price is broken out of. It retested and it's come back up. Whenever I go into an earnings call with any stocks, I like to see where the price action is for the previous couple weeks. Notice the vertical nature of this movement coming into this pivot high. Whenever you have a vertical move like that, that makes me believe that typically on earnings calls, it will be a little bit of a sell the news event. We'll see, and it's no guarantee. Again, earnings calls are kind of a 50-50 coin toss. But what I like to do is see any sort of pattern that gives me insight as to which way the stock's going to move. And usually when you have such a vertical move up, it's a sell the news event, because how much more is that company stock going to do on their earnings since it already has been moving up so much in the most recent history? And so that's go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask you. I mean, I'm not saying that you have a crystal ball or anything, but where do you anticipate? I know you said it may be a sell the news event, but looking at the charts purely on a technical basis, where could this be going?
If it does in fact sell, and look here, post market right now, we're starting to pop right up. So my sell the news event was wrong. Looks like 107.55 is the first level of resistance. And here, let me go ahead and flip this on too. so we can get some after hours action just to see if we get up there to that 107.55. It's gotten very close. You can see right here is that trend line right here, 107.55 on Starbucks. So far, the report out with Starbucks is good. And just as I said, it's a coin flip. You don't really know which way earnings are going to go until they come out. And that's why I did what I did here, Lawton, where you see I've got support and I've also got resistance levels mapped out. That way you're ready. If you wanted to make a trade and day trade on any of the earnings, you need to figure out levels on both ends. That way you're going to be prepared. These movements happen so quick. So this helps me go ahead and analyze a level that I would like to trade.
Yeah.
So next,
sorry. And before we switch off, or we can come back to it later, I just want to come back to it to see if your levels were correct. Just not to put any pressure on you, but I just think it would be interesting for the viewers to show how well support and resistance levels are able to work despite, earnings being so volatile, right? That can actually give you an edge on the markets if you say, okay, I'm not going to try and predict where it's going to go, but I'm prepared for either way to make money,
Yeah. And the good thing about finding the levels for earnings is they abide very well to gap fills, Fibonacci retracements, pivots, and trend lines. I found that the most obvious levels when you are trying to trade earnings usually turn out to be the best ones because the movements are so fast. There's not a lot of time to react. You better have your levels ready in order to make that trade, capitalize on it. So where I got this 107.55, I went past this initial pivot and I looked over here at this major pivot before we had a sell-off. That tells me that there were still a lot of buyers in this area. But then once that buying receded, all those buyers were left holding the bag and prices never got back up into that area yet. So that would be a great area of resistance so that when price goes up, there could be people that are ready to unload right there at that spot, giving you the high probability chance of a turnaround in price action.
That's amazing. All right, guys, we're going to come back to Starbucks later, but what else do you have for me, Drew?
I got SAP. Whenever you're trying to chart and find levels at all-time highs, it's very tough. There's not too much. There's not a lot of data back in the charts for us to analyze and figure out where the next levels are going to be. One of those is SAP. SAP reports earnings today after the close, and you see I've got a support level right here at 240.20. But this is really where I think price is going to go if we do fall down. Now, again, remember what I mentioned about this vertical move up, right? Here's that vertical move. And whenever you have a situation like that that's so extended, it just, the probability shift towards we need some sort of correction. And it doesn't mean that the stock's done with going up. It just means that sometimes if there's an earnings event, if there's a news event, if there's economic events, that usually at that point, there should be some sort of turn down. So that's why I'm angling at these levels of support, because really the sky's the limit should SAP continue moving higher.
Cool. All right. And what was the third chart that you have there?
The next one is F5. F5 is reporting earnings today. And then here, look at this. They are all the way up at 310. Look at this nice trend line that I've got set here. And price is already above it, right at 309.95. Now, if I switch over to after hours, let's see how price reacted.
Wow.
Going up into it. Look at that rip. Now, keep in mind, this trend line gets adjusted with after hours. If I flip back over to the daily chart, this trend line that I have is roughly, it's right around 296 or so. So check this out on the 10-minute. 296 is right about here, and we didn't even hesitate 1 minute. So F5 has done one fantastic job on their earnings. We just moved up, maybe just pause for this little candle right here at that trend line. Notice it's right here at 296. Right there, we had a little bit of a pause down and a push right back up. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if price action does come back down to this trend line in the after hours at 296. We're now at 308. So fantastic move on F5.
Yeah, this thing keeps ripping. I mean, when something breaks this trend line, one of your trend lines, and continues to go higher and make new all-time highs, how are you able to find more resistance lines? Or where can you expect resistance to be? I know it's really difficult because I've tried doing it myself.
Yeah, it is pretty difficult. The next level you do when you're trying to find all-time highs, you find major pivots, like what I did here. I found these major pivots, strung a trend line together. Then you start getting into upward angle trajectory of movements, whether that's a starting area from here to here, and to see where that maps out, or if maybe it's this pivot over here to this pivot and see where that maps out. But it is really hard to find. And it does take some time whenever you're studying the charts. That's why when prices go to all-time highs, we do like to see RSIs. We take a look at that. We take a look at time counts. We see if other patterns present themselves, if we're just not able to find any trend lines at the moment or parallels that can give us an idea and anticipation of where price is going to go.
Okay, amazing. Before we go back to Starbucks, we have a bunch of big earnings this week, and I wanted to try out a new little section that I used to do with Benjamin Poole when we had a show together. It's kind of called bullish or bearish. I'm just going to give you some stocks that are having earnings today, and I just want you to talk about whether the move favors an upside or a downside and what those kind of targets could be, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. Let's fire away.
All right, let's start light and do INTC.
INTC Intel.
And those have earnings in 2 days, so that's going to be on Thursday.
That's correct. You see it right here, Thursday. This last period started there, December 24th. This stock is so beaten up. I think that if you are going to see further downside, it's really not going to be much more. So they're really going to have to miss hard to have a lot more downside. Notice that we have a time count developing too, coming right into all of these bottom pivots. So I would suspect this area is going to be major support should we sell off further, but then upward target is going to be right here on this inclining trend line. We do have a measured move too right here based off this inverse head and shoulder pattern that looks like it's being negated right now too. So here would be the first resistance on the upward movement, but then ultimately I think eventually Intel's going to get up here to this inclining trend line.
Okay, cool. All right, next one, heavy hitter, Apple. I mean, that's going to be massive.
It very well could be. The main thing that Apple's going to have to do is get above this trend line. That's going to be what's holding price down. Apple's had a tremendous fall over the last couple of weeks. And if I flip over to the weekly chart, check this out too. We were notified that we were about to see a fall with this beautiful topping tail right here on the top of the chart, and also corresponding to pivot resistance. So we knew Apple was about to have a great fall. It sure enough did. I connected trend line over here to this pivot and have found the support area that we're currently in. So Apple's had a fantastic move up today as well as yesterday, even though NVIDIA was beating down the markets. The next area of resistance for Apple is going to be 242.58. But keep in mind, with earnings, we can gap right above that. Should we gap above that, then we're going to be looking at this area of resistance at the top end with this trend line, this inclining trend line right here.
All right, the last one I have for you, also on Thursday, is Team, T-E-A-M. That's the last one.
T-E-A-M. All right, let's take a look at this. I don't really trade this stock, so let me see where we're looking. All right, so look at this beautiful breakout from this trend line, how it almost came back down and retested it, okay? Whenever it did that, it's basically resetting itself for the chart. So in this particular chart, notice this is an inverse head and shoulder pattern right here. So that implies to me Team's got a lot of upside. So we could be moving up on earnings with Team. We'll have to see how that goes. But I know that this current chart setup tells me that we're going to be going higher. Should we sell off after earnings? This neckline is the target that I'm watching. The neckline, it's a dynamic one. A lot of times we don't mention an exact price point to you all over this chat because these prices move with time. If we were to get there within the next couple of days, this trend line sitting roughly around 226.76. But should it be next week, we're now talking about under 220, right around 217 or 219. So keep that in mind. But this trend line, if you connect pivot to pivot, it outlines our inverse head and shoulder pattern right here. Oop. Here, let me draw it over there like that, like this, and like that. You can see right there, we've got that nice head and shoulder pattern, which ultimately is going to bring the target up for Team, as I said, much, much higher. We're going to be looking at about, let's see where this is going to go in real time, maybe 410.01. So 410.01 is the target. Yeah. That's a massive move on team. Now, keep in mind, this could take a long time for that measured move to play out, but it's in the charts. The charts are telling us team has a high probability chance of going to 410 sometime in the future.
Cool. That's amazing, Drew. Do you have anything else you want to go over or talk about?
Not today. Mind the charts. Key thing to take away today is we had light volume. So while it was a great up move, keep that in the back of your head. There's not a lot of conviction pushing everything back up too.
Cool, guys. And before we end, I have a word from our sponsors and a very handsome fellow.
All right, guys, Lawton here with Verified Investing, back with another Legacy Academy video. So we're still in the business mindset, but we're going to do a couple mini games that we're going to cut back as soon as I am done with those. All right, guys, so I've just completed 2 mini games, and let's see my progress. I'm ranked 1,950th in the world. I mean, moving up 500 spots just like that in one episode. I'm shooting for that top 1,000. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. Oh, Drew is on the screen. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to Legacy Academy for sponsoring us. I mean, just a really amazing app. If you're interested in learning, improving on yourself, working on your skills, and earning some tokens in the meantime, go ahead and check out Legacy Academy. The link will be in the description below. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lawton Ho, and I'm joined by...
I'm Drew Dosick. Thanks so much, guys.
Take it easy. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.